I'd like to continue our series here. I'm Kelvin Leibold, the Area Farm Management Field Specialist, and we'll continue to go through our 6-part series here. Our first part was on cash rental rates. Our second series here is going to focus on landlord and tenant communication. Landlord-tenant communication is a two-way street. It's often a challenge to keep up to date with what's going on in agriculture, about the current costs, the current technology. So again, landlords want that kind of information, and it's a little bit challenging at times. Producers need to keep in mind they need to share that information. Again, the landlords are always looking for more information about their land. Oftentimes, producers actually know more about the land than the landlords do. The producers may have rented those farms for several years. They may be familiar with the yield monitoring maps and other sources of data. So again, as much as they can share, it's always beneficial. Well, different ways of sharing information. We got newsletters and emails these days. We got phone calls, and you can probably talk on your phone as you're driving your tractor across the field these days with today's technology. I've got one of my clients that actually has a web page. He used to produce a newsletter and doesn't do that anymore. He just puts his information up on the web page, and then I think he's got 13 different landlords. He puts in a link, and so each landlord has a password to go into their individual link off his web page, and they can see the planting as it occurred and what varieties were planted on his farm. They can look at the spraying records. They can look at the fertilizer application records, this fertilizer grid testing that he does. Then they can follow up with the combine yield monitor maps in the fall. So the tenant is going in and putting a lot of data up for the landlords, as well as some highlights of what's going on in his personal life, maybe what the children did at the fair this year, and those kinds of things. So communication shouldn't be just a one-time thing. I think we've got the technology now to do it almost constantly. If we take a look at providing information, maybe a standardized form would be helpful. So we've gone in, and again, if you've been following along on our Ag Decision Maker, you know that's our website where we have much of our information. So most of this information is confidential. A lot of discussion today about big data and all this information that we're generating and who can reach in and grab that. But I think the key is to successful communication is to have it happen often. Again, talk about what's going on in agriculture, what's happened with fertilizer prices, what's happened with corn and soybean prices, what's going on in the seed industry. Those are all very dynamic. So also report back on what's going on the farm, what's happening with different production systems, and get to know the next generation as well. I think that's one of the things that we need to think about is a lot of our landowners are fairly old. Oftentimes the children will actually take over the management of the property before the parents pass on, and so it's important to get to know multi-generations. So start early, use facts. Tenants need to know their own break-evens and what those overhead costs are. I've mentioned earlier about the idea of a burn rate. If you rent a farm as a tenant and lose $100 an acre and spend another $50 on family living, that's a $150 an acre burn rate. And you need to know how long you can hang in there and keep renting that kind of ground with those kinds of losses. Now, not every farm is a loss, but as we've seen the revenue streams decline, certainly we've seen a lot of farms in 2016 that have turned out to have substantial burn rates. Part of this also is tied to how much government program payments that we'll get in the future. And so we'll have a separate video just on farm program payments to explain the importance and how they're capitalized in rents. So again, people dealing with family oftentimes struggle. Nobody wants to be involved in these hard negotiations, but it's business, and so you need to do that. Again, landowners, as I mentioned in the earlier video, they have increasing costs. and decreasing revenues will be a double whammy as they continue to face increasing costs. Alright, so what are the facts? Well, yields and prices, government payments, crop insurance. Government payments and crop insurance for sure are difficult for landlords to understand, so you may need to spend some time working on that. Soil maps and fertilizer records are important. And again, oftentimes tenants, the biggest complaint is, well, I'd pay more rent except the drainage is so poor. So we can go in and take a look at satellite pictures off the Ortho satellite website and see a lot of these drain issues. So keep that in mind. Good communication, open communication, but still might not work. Okay, so maybe you just need to have a little bit more time. Maybe you want to move the deadline for renegotiating the rent farther out so that you've got more time to gather more facts, like maybe what this fall harvest's yields look like, or what this fall's prices look like, so you can terminate the lease now but then come back and renegotiate the rents later on. The rents don't have to be set by September 1st. Again, focus on what the other person is saying and what they really mean. If you need to, try to clarify some of those points. If there's issues the other party is willing to compromise on, or there's some things that just can't be negotiated, eventually you'll have to make a decision whether you can make it work or not. So again, use a little bit of trust, use a little bit of tact, and use a little bit of logic here, and try to understand the other party's perspective. Landlords tell me that they've seen a lot of tenants driving fancy trucks, building new houses, taking vacations, so they may not feel the need to be so giving. Well, the world has changed. It's changed dramatically in the last 5 years. Certainly the growth of ethanol in the world changed it the other direction very positively for a number of years, but now the rest of the world is saying, okay, we can produce, somebody has to cut back. And even had a party the other day that wanted me to go up and work on a situation, and I said, no, you don't need me, you need a mediator. So there is Iowa Mediation Services here in Iowa, and maybe there's some others that are willing to come to the table and help negotiate between the different parties. Well, thank you for being a part of this video. This one's a little bit shorter. Talks about the need for communication. It should be ongoing, and it should be honest and upfront. And so good luck here as you move through this next year negotiating your rents. Kelvin Leibold, Iowa State University Extension.